Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. St. Bridget's sits 3 blocks off the lake, a square-shouldered brick church with a bell that tolls like a work whistle. On June's wedding day, Marquette wore its late September colors. Sugar maples, burnished copper, a breeze coming off Superior with a cool bite that lifted veils and set hymnals fluttering. Inside the pews smelled of lemon oil and wool coats. Folks I'd known since kindergarten, men who buy our cider every fall, teachers who coached Little League, filled the nave in their Sunday best, turning to wave as I passed. I smiled because that's what you do when the town is watching. 5 minutes, the sacristan whispered. The organist flexed his fingers and let a ribbon of sound fall across the aisle. June's bouquet Empire apples, tucked among white roses, waited on a chair by the dressing room. I touched the petals, then stepped away before my hands could shake the blooms loose. I have run Whitfield Orchard through drought and blight and one brutal winter that cracked the irrigation lines like bone. I'm not a woman given to trembling. But my daughter's hands when she was little used to rest in mine like warm leaves, and today they would rest in someone else's. I said to no one in particular. I slipped down the side hallway and out the ramp door into the lot. The wind hit clean, smelling of wet pavement and distant pine. A gull called sharp as a nail. The lot had the usual parade of town cars and pickup trucks, the kind that carry snow shovels year-round. Beyond the last row, 2 men leaned against a slate-gray sedan, heads bent over a phone on speaker. One voice belonged to my future son-in-law. Derek Hale has the kind of smile that photographs well. The voice behind it is different, slicker, flatter. I'm telling you, man, after tonight, it's all straightforward, Derek said. She signs what I put in front of her. Family brand makes the bank soft. We refinance the dirt folded into Northco and we're finally liquid. June, you sure the other man, Cal, I would learn, laughed under his breath. She's not exactly your type. Derek snorted. She's a signature. That's the type I need. The gull wheeled again. Somewhere inside the building, the organist found a second theme, bright and insistent. I stood behind a boxwood hedge, palms pressed flat to the cool brick, and listened because I could not unhear. Cal's voice went sly, and the mother. A pause, faint static over the speaker. Overprotective, Derek said. Sentimental about trees. Sophie's been managing the optics. Nobody's going to let a control freak mom nuke a wedding. Relax. Sophie. Maid of honor, public relations smile, June's best friend since they ran relay at the county fair. I felt a heat rise in my chest that wasn't the wind. Anyway, Derek went on, after tonight we're in. Give me a week, I'll have the last documents through e-notary. By harvest, we're scaled. Well, Cal said, and I could hear the grin, here's to harvest. Their fists touched. The phone clicked dark. The men straightened their jackets and headed toward the ramp door as if they had prayed. I stayed by the hedge until the bell tolled again. A breath too, and then I went back in. The dressing room was warm with hairspray and body heat. Satin hissed as bridesmaids shifted on folding chairs. In the corner, the flower girls were peeling stickers and whispering. June stood at the mirror in her tea-length dress, cream not white, because she said white didn't feel like her shoulders freckled from summer hair, pinned in a loose twist you could ruin just by thinking too hard. When she saw me, her mouth found the smile she keeps for strangers and for me when she's tired. You okay, Mom? She asked. I am. I wasn't sure what truth could survive in that small word, but I set it down between us like a bowl of water for a dog that's been running. You look like someone who belongs in a painting. Her eyes shone. Don't make me cry. Sophie patted over in heels. She could sprint in an arm already moving around June's waist. Our bride is perfect, she sang soft and bright. Mags, you're pale. Want me to grab you a Sprite? I had never liked the nickname. It makes you small so the person using it can fit you in their pocket. No, thank you, I said. June, could we have a second? The chatter dipped and then resumed at a polite hum. Sophie's hand tightened for a beat before she let June go. The door clicked shut behind the last bridesmaid. It's nothing about you. I began to keep the room level. I stepped outside and, Mom. June's voice was gentle, and I recognized the tone she uses with second graders who have had a bad recess. Don't. Not right now. Sophie slipped back in without knocking eyes wide like a helpful deer. Pastors lining up the processional. She touched June's sleeve, then turned to me. Mags, it would mean a lot if we kept the energy warm. No last-minute nerves. This is how PR works in a town that pretends it doesn't use PR kindness. Used as a throttle, the story trimmed until only the approved shape can breathe. I heard Derek in the lot, I said steady. He was talking about signatures and banks, and Sophie lifted a palm. He's a startup guy. They talk like that. It doesn't mean he doesn't love her. June's eyes flinched. I saw it, a shadow passing under a wave there and gone. She reached for her bouquet thumb, brushing a red apple until it flashed. I love him, Mom, she said the words true enough to stand. I'm nervous. That's all. The door opened again this time with a head in a headset. 2 minutes. Sophie beamed. Time to be radiant. She smoothed June's shoulder blades, then turned the full brightness of that beam on me. You raised a good one. When the room emptied to the hall, I asked for 30 seconds. June nodded. She and I faced the mirror, not each other. In it, I could see the streak of gray that refuses to take dye near my temple, and below it a woman who has signed for tractors and borrowed against frost fans, and once slept on a cot in the packing shed when a late freeze threatened the crop. I won't make you late, I said. Here is the only sentence I can stand behind if the world is trying to make you smaller, you don't owe it your voice. She breathed in and out the way my father taught her to blow across a jug to make it hum. Then the marshal of the procession called her name. In the vestibule, I took my place in the front pew, hands folded so tight my knuckles hurt. The stained glass saints cast their colored light in bands across the aisle, sapphire garnet green as the inside of an apple. Derek stood by the altar profile, cut like a coin, smiling with the precision of someone who's practiced in bathroom mirrors. Sophie lifted the train and organized the bridesmaids by height. The organ filled its lungs. When the doors at the back opened, June stepped into the light, and all the instincts I've ever had to stand to run to shield rose like birds and would not land. I unclenched my hands and felt the rosary press a pattern into my palm, small circles like seeds. There are hours for talking and hours for keeping your mouth shut. There are also records and paper and the clean facts that don't care who smiles while they're spoken. I let the music lift and carry, and I chose the tools I know best. If love won't listen, paper will. The reception spilled across the rectory lawn under strings of cafe bulbs, their warm circles of light bobbing in the lake breeze. A high school quartet sawed out Moon River, and the parish ladies marched from the kitchen with casseroles that had names and reputations. On the dessert table, someone had arranged apple hand pies in concentric rings, the glaze catching every bulb like fish scales. June and Derek waltzed in the grass, careful with the hem, careful with the smiles. When the DJ asked for the mother of the bride, I kept my hands wrapped around a paper cup of cider as if it were the only warm thing left in the Upper Peninsula. People came to hug me, forearms perfume compliments I could have recited with them. She looks radiant, Maggie. You must be so proud. I nodded because I am capable of the posture of pride. Beyond the ring of light, I could see the parking lot where the wind had carried Derek's voice, the little slate-gray sedan like a period at the end of a sentence I did not write. Sophie moved among the tables with the confidence of a maitre d', quick to refill a drink, quicker to intercept a conversation. When two women from the farmer's market leaned toward each other with that bright nosy glint, she arrived with a camera and a joke. Okay, you two give me your "we're definitely behaving" faces. They laughed and posed, and the glint turned into a smile. It's a talent the way she rewrites the stream, and everybody thanks her for the scenic drive. I lasted to the toasts. Derek's best man made a speech about hustle and building together, and Derek tapped his glass and said, June steadied him, which is something a person can say without lying, even if he means steadies like a paperweight. June's cheeks were high with color and joy. I held my cup between two palms and thought how a braced smile and a real one looked the same from a distance. When the sparkler tunnel formed and the newlyweds ran through a shower of cheap stars, I stood back with the other older women and clapped. The sedan pulled away in a ribbon of tinny horns and shouted blessings. Somebody yelled, "See you at the orchard next weekend," and I lifted a hand because I was not certain which weekend they meant. In the days after the town settled into the kind of gossip that doesn't feel like gossip to the person speaking it. At the feed store, a man I've known 40 years said, "Heard you had yourself a moment before the service. Mags?" Nerves. At the farmer's market, one of the jam. Ladies put a hand on my forearm and told me how if she had had a mother like me, maybe her first marriage would have turned out different. And then she stepped back and told her friend I had a hard time letting go. It's a neat trick to sympathize and scold in the same sentence. In the bakery line, two teenagers from the high school cross-country team mimicked the way I press my lips when I don't want to speak. I went back to the orchard and walked the rows until the dogs stopped following. The wind out of the north had a chisel in it. A week later, June texted, "Stop by tonight, Derek's cooking. He thinks he can do your roast chicken." A little heart at the end, the kind she uses when she's offering peace for something we never named as a quarrel. Their rental sits on a hill above the co-op, one of those new builds with efficient windows, and a garage big enough to keep a winter inside. Derek opened the door in an apron and a grin. The house smelled like lemon and rosemary and something burning just a little. "Mags," he said as if we had long been affectionate. "You're just in time." June came out of the hall in socks, hair, and a knot, eyes happy to see me. She hugged me so fully I forgot for one breath what I knew. "You look tired," I said, because mothers are given that line at birth and because it was true. "I'm great," she said, which can also be true when a person is tired. "Work's good. The kids are doing their leaf projects. We ate at the kitchen island chicken potatoes, the lemon cut in a star on top. Derek poured a pale wine and told a story about a client who thought a brokerage account worked like a piggy bank. June laughed and filled in the parts that made him look kinder. I watched the way they moved around each other, the way she glanced at him before she answered a question, the way he touched her shoulder when he needed a garnish passed. When the plates were scraped and the pan soaking, he kissed her temple, wiped his hands on a towel, and said, "Baby, we should tackle those documents while your mom's here to bless us. She has the good signature luck." June rolled her eyes at me in a men in their paperwork way I recognized from my own marriage. "It's boring," she said. "You don't have to—" "I'll keep you company," I said. My voice came out even. That felt like a small miracle. Derek brought a silver laptop to the table and opened a folder labeled Northco. The screen threw a clean, chilly light across the wood. "It's mostly countersigning," he said. "Housekeeping, streamlining. You know how banks are." I do know how banks are. I have smiled across desks at men who were younger than my irrigation system and let them explain my own collateral to me as if it were a riddle. I have had to say more than once, "No, sir, the orchard's land stays with me. We are discussing equipment, not the earth itself." He queued up a series of DocuSign packets. "Start here," he said, pointing. "The sign tags will walk you through." June settled, tucked a leg under, and began the clicks that make a modern pledge adopt signature, confirm, initial. The room filled with the small domestic sounds of a person trusting. On the second packet, the printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out a stack in case anyone wanted to feel the weight of it. June signed on the screen, and Dutiful put ink to paper. Derek leaned back, ankles crossed the way a man does when he believes the train is on time. He set his phone on the table face down. It buzzed. He flipped it and said, "Just a sec, client. Sorry," and took the call out on the balcony, the door clicking shut behind him. June smiled at me and said she needed the bathroom because wine is like that, and I nodded and lifted my glass and waited until the hall swallowed her. Then I stood. I moved the printed stack into the lamp's pool of light. I did not understand all of it because some people build paragraphs the way other people build hedges to keep the wrong folks out. But enough words stood clear. Durable general power of attorney. Appointed agent Derek James Hale. Authority includes banking, lending, real estate, personal property, and the initiation and execution of security instruments. An addendum, consent to collateralization. A schedule, collateral includes intangible property known as Whitfield Orchard. Brand associated marks, contracts, receivables, and any proceeds thereof. Another schedule, guarantee. A line that made my hands cool. Grantor acknowledges that certain equipment located at 41 County Road 12 may secure present or future obligations. I turned pages. A convenience email address for e-notary coordination I did not recognize. A signature block pre-populated with June's legal name. A field for witnessed by spouse. I took out my phone and photographed each page face up, face down, close on the lines that mattered. My hands were clean. The lamp made a circle on the table like a stage. In the bathroom, the faucet ran and stopped, a woman negotiating with a mirror. I slid everything back exactly as it had been and sat calm when the doors opened. June lowered herself into the chair with a sigh and continued where the blue tags told her to. Derek returned with an apology that lived in his teeth. He kissed the top of her head as if blessing a well. "You sure you want to keep going tonight?" I asked, as neutral as a weather report. "We're almost done," June said and smiled too quickly. When it was finished, Derek collected the papers, squared them in a slap, and fed them into a scanner that hummed and blinked and swallowed. He checked his phone for the confirmation emails. "Perfect," he said to nobody and everybody. "We're efficient." I thanked them for dinner. On the porch, the air snapped at my knuckles. Derek hugged me the way a good son-in-law is supposed to, and June squeezed me with the kind of squeeze that says I'm trying. I walked to my truck and sat with my hands on the wheel until the cabin light timed out. At home, I put the dogs out, and then back in kept the kitchen dark and opened the photos on my phone in the glow of the stove clock. I enlarged the lines that had made my stomach go cold. I read them aloud once, as if saying the words could put them into a place where they did less damage. Then I copied the entire set to a folder on the cloud and to a cheap thumb drive from the junk drawer, the kind you get free at trade shows with somebody's logo on it. The drive felt like a stone in my palm. Nathan Cole answers his phone like an attorney who was raised by a teacher, present, measured, willing to repeat himself. He was my husband's friend before he was my lawyer, but he never confuses those roles. "Send what you have," he said, and his voice did not rise when I told him what I thought I had heard and what I knew I had seen. I emailed the photographs one by one, each file a small door. "All?" He called back after 11. "Okay," he said, not gentle and not unkind. "That POA is as broad as they come. It authorizes your son-in-law to act for June across the board. In combination with the consent and guarantee, it opens lanes to pledge things she owns now or later. If any instrument tries to touch the orchard land, we'll fight it on title. But the brand equipment contracts, those can be dragged into the net if the lenders are sloppy or his paperwork is aggressive. I wrote on the back of an envelope, broad brand equipment net. The dog sighed at my feet. The house ticked with the heat. What do? I asked. Not alert, he said. Not accuse. If you push, they'll tidy. We want them exactly as they are. Keep a line to June. If more documents show up, get them. I'll start quiet inquiries. If anything gets recorded at the county or filed under a shell company, I'll see it. And if I stopped, he let me stop. Paper cuts both ways, Nathan said. Let me do the cutting where it needs doing. You keep your world level. When I hung up, I stood in the mudroom and listened to the late train float through town, that long, low note that makes even a person with a full life wonder where else the tracks go. I took the thumb drive, wrapped it in a sandwich bag, and slid it into the coffee can of odd screws and wing nuts in the pantry. Then I leaned my forehead against the cool wall, because I am not, in fact, made of orchard and weather. I am a woman who would prefer sometimes to be held and told she's not making any of this up. In the morning, I did not go to the market. I walked the South Rows with my notebook and counted bruised fruit like a miser counts coins. The day wore itself thin and then mended. In the afternoon, I drove to the office supply store and bought a new binder and a pack of stick-on tabs. I chose the binder with a clear pocket on the front, slid in a scrap of paper with a date, and wrote a single word across the tab with a black pen that claimed to be archival. Records. I brought the binder to Nathan's office the way you carry a baby out into February, zipped inside my coat, pressed close, my shoulders turned to keep the wind from it. His firm sits on the second floor above a barber who has been there forever and a coffee shop that will be gone by spring. The stairwell smelled like hair tonic and cinnamon. Nathan had 3 legal pads open on his desk and a plant he has not yet learned how to water. He read every page I slid toward him, pen tapping once at the places I had tabbed and read. All right, he said finally, and the word landed like a plumb bob. We need eyes, quiet ones. He dialed from a landline. Tomas, it's Cole. I've got a matter that needs your sort of patience. Tomas Vega met me at a diner that still makes its own pies. He ordered coffee and didn't touch the sugar, a man who keeps his hands from wanting. He has the look of someone who did 20 years in uniforms and learned what to see and what to let pass. You tell me the story, he said. I'll tell you what the receipts say. So I did. The parking lot, the papers, the scan, June's steady hand doing what the blue tags asked. He nodded without interrupting. Companies he asked when I stopped. Northco. He keeps a folder labeled that. There's a Leo cousin or something. I spelled the name slow enough for his notebook. Tomas closed the book and slid it into his jacket. We start outside in, he said. What's already public, what's almost public, what people brag about in places they forget are public. I went back to the orchard and worked the afternoon shift in the farm store, scooping donuts to bags and making change with gloves on. Half an hour before closing, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, check your email. An old habit made me look at the ceiling before I opened anything dangerous. The email was a single line from Tomas, a link below it. The link led to the state's business filings. Northco Pines LLC had articles of organization 3 months old. The registered agent was a mail drop in Grand Rapids. The manager, L.J. Hale. 2 minutes later, another email arrived, screenshots from a permits database in Chicago Great Lakes Bank, appointment redeploy line, client Northco Pines LLC. A third, a photo of Derek and a woman in a charcoal sheath dress leaving a glass building with a winter tree reflected in its side. Madison Reed Tomas captioned under it, commercial lending, public LinkedIn. The next morning, the orchard's office Wi-Fi hiccuped under the weight of files arriving. Tomas attached receipts that anyone could have overlooked Derek's hotel folio, which showed 2 room keys and drinks charged to R, a public calendar cache with 4 past entries labeled Northco, branding collateral review, a boomerang video scraped from a boutique's social feed, the woman in the charcoal dress clinking a flute with a man whose tie I recognized. None of it was proof that could move a judge today. All of it made a shape I could not pretend not to see. I forwarded the lot to Nathan, then drove the South Road where the maples are taller and show you the weather before it gets to town. In the ditch were the first brown leaves of the season curled like hands. When my phone rang, I pulled into the VFW lot and let the engine idle. Not nothing, Nathan said, reading as he spoke. Pines is new. The bank's legit. If he rolls June's authority into that entity, it complicates how things look. Tomas and I will keep pulling. You keep your line to her. I can take her to lunch, I said. Take her to lunch, he said. Don't take her to war. The way a town talks changes an inch at a time until your name sits in a sentence you don't recognize. On Monday, a post appeared in Harbor Moms, the private group that controls bake sales and reputations with equal skill, so proud of Derek for giving back mentoring at the Youth Finance Club. On Wednesday, another hot take: parents who micromanage their adult children's weddings might need hobbies. The post had no name on it, but the voice wore bright lipstick. It used 3 exclamation points the way Sophie does when she wants you to feel the sparkle. Tomas slid into the farm store that afternoon, bought a pint of cider he wouldn't drink, and stood where the tourists don't. I don't waste time on rumors, he said almost under his breath. But I do track where they stand up before they walk. The admins for Harbor Moms had coffee at Finch and Feather this morning. Your Sophie paid the check. She's careful. Not careful enough that the barista didn't tell his girlfriend he saw them. The girlfriend tells the internet. The internet keeps a receipt. He set the untouched cider on the counter. This part isn't for court, he said. It's for your spine. You're not imagining the tilt. I rang him up and put the pint in a paper bag, because sometimes a person needs to carry something out. June and I met for lunch at a place that grills the buns on the flat top and never writes down your order. She wore the scarf I gave her last winter, the one with tiny woven apples in the border. She didn't talk about work until her fries were almost gone. How's second grade? I asked. They smell like crayons, she said. The smile reached her eyes and then passed. She took a breath like a diver. We're refinancing Derek's company. It's normal. He says we need to simplify the way things are titled. My napkin folded itself. And you? She looked past my shoulder at the window where the glass shook when the trucks hit the light. He wants me on a couple of things to make timelines easier, she said. It's boring. I'm trying to be brave about paperwork. Being brave about paperwork, I said, is how your grandmother kept this family from selling the north lot when the interest rates got weird. It counts. She turned her burger in its paper and then set it down. Do you think I'm naive? She asked, and there are questions a mother should be allowed to answer only after someone else does it for her. I think I said, and I kept the sentence small enough to carry, you are a kind person. People design worlds around kind people. June nodded as if I had told her the weather. The waitress refilled our waters. We talked about the pumpkin patch days and which field trip I would chaperone if she needed a body on a bus. In the parking lot, she hugged me and said Derek had a pitch in Chicago, nothing glamorous, and I said to text when she got home. Mom, she added, and her mouth softened the way it did when she was 8 and had to confess to taking 2 cookies. Thank you for not making me pick a side. I was your side before there were others, I said, and let her go first so she wouldn't have to watch me watching. On Friday, Tomas texted, meet Nathan Thritgars, 30, bring binder. The sky had the flat, bright look it gets before a hard wind. Nathan had added a second plant to his windowsill, which did not improve the situation. Tomas laid out his week like a carpenter unrolling a tool wrap. Public filings give us pines. Social puts Derek and Madison in the same rooms on the same days. Financial breadcrumbs, a Venmo to Leo labeled truck, then a check from Northco to Pines, consulting fee that clears 2 days later. Not proof of crime, proof of movement. He slid a small recorder across the desk and pressed play. Bar noise lifted ice, a cash drawer, a television 3 channels past sports. Derek's voice entered from the side, careless with volume in the way of a man who assumes the room is for him. A brand value is the lever, he said. The trees and tractors are cute for the postcards. What the bank wants is the collateral they can file fast. Marks, contracts, forward orders, accounts. Pine it all. A woman's laugh brushed the mic. You and your metaphors. Madison, according to Tomas's note. Derek again lower. June signs Leo, runs the paper we're done by. Tomas clicks stop. Recorded in a public bar, he said. No expectation of privacy. Names are in the photos. I don't need to hear the rest to know what the rest sounds like. Nathan leaned back. It's enough to ask a court to keep hands off the things he's reaching for. The land is a separate fight if he's dumb enough to touch it. What he's circling now is cleaner and faster, brand receivables contracts. We can ask for a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction that bars new liens, transfers, or encumbrances related to June's authority and anything bearing Whitfield's mark until we sort ownership and agency. He picked up his pen. We'll need a declaration from you, Maggie, what you heard, what you saw attached to copies of the documents you photographed. Tomas will attach the public pieces he found. I'll leave out anything that doesn't help a judge sleep. He began dictating to himself a habit from back when his hands were steadier at a keyboard. Tomas watched the hallway as if he expected it to fling something at us. I sat with my hands flat on my knees because that is what kept them still. By closing time at the courthouse, I had signed a stack as tall as a Bible. Nathan fast-walked them down the corridor while Tomas and I waited in chairs that punished the lower back. Through the glass, I could see the clerk in a cardigan read the caption stamped the first page and slide the file into a plastic bin that meant the judge would see it today, not Monday. It is a minor miracle the noise a stamp makes when it lands on the right square. When Nathan came back, he didn't grin because he is not built for grinning at milestones. He is built to tend them. We have a hearing on the TRO, he said. We'll serve Derek and Leo with notice that they are not to move anything that smells like Whitfield until the court says otherwise. If they've already moved something, we'll find it. If they haven't, this holds them in place. I drove home with the binder on the seat beside me, as if it could slide. The dogs met me at the mudroom and shook off the day. I fed them, washed my hands, and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the overhead light. For a long while I listened to the refrigerator run and the clock over the stove keep the kind of time people can bear. The next morning I was sweeping the farm store floor when Tomas's number lit my phone. He didn't bother with hello. You said Derek has a brother, he said. Avery. I said cousin, I corrected. Leo is cousin. There's also a brother, yes. Avery ran an auto shop out on County G until he didn't. Good, Tomas said. Or bad, depending. He's the one who knows where the bodies are buried and would like them dug up. I've got a line on where he drinks his dinner. I propped the broom. I'll go, I said. A lawyer would tell you not to, he said. I'm not your lawyer. I'm the guy who worries about how you get home. Meet me at the lot by the feed mill. Don't go in alone. We parked across from a bar that used to be a tractor dealership and now is a collection of neon signs negotiating their boundaries. The place smelled like spilled beer, fried mushrooms, and sorrow. In the back, a man with Derek's jawline and none of his polish sat at a table made sticky by 1,000 elbows. His hands were clean but nervous. When I said his name, he flinched and then held like a deer that has decided to be a horse. I'm not here to ask you to forgive him, I said. I'm asking you to remember. Avery stared at his beer and then up at me. The clock over the bar clicked from one number to the next. Behind us, a bowling league argued about a spare as if it were weather. He took our dad's retirement fund, Avery said. Voice flat like a floor you test for rot. Said it was short-term bridge money. The bridge never landed on the other bank. Tomas slid a photo onto the table, Derek and Madison outside the glass building. Another Derek's tablet opened to DocuSign. Another North Coast filing. Avery's mouth tightened the way a man's does when he wants to spit and knows it won't help. You want me to talk, he said. I want you to tell the truth, I said. In a room where it has to be listened to. Avery took a breath that lifted his shoulders. I can do that, he said, and he looked at the photo again as if memorizing the face of a person he had already known by heart. Outside, the wind had turned. The neon flickered in the glass of my truck like a heartbeat that couldn't make up its mind. I put the binder back in the passenger seat and placed my hand on it the way you do when the road is rutted and you want the things you love to ride steady. They served Derek at 7:42 a.m., right in front of the cafe where he buys a latte he calls his Octane. Leo took his copy in a parking lot behind a tire shop, frowning at the envelope like it might stain. By 9, the courthouse had them both. The district courtroom is a long shoebox that smells faintly of floor wax and old paper. Fluorescents buzz. A flag leans in a brass stand like it's tired of standing. I sat behind Nathan at counsel table with my binder tabs like orchard flags red, for documents, blue for money, green for brand. Tomas took the row behind me where he could see all the doors. On the far side, Derek slid into place with a lawyer whose suit cost what a frost fan costs used. Leo positioned himself half a step behind Derek like a picture frame that insists on being seen. June came in quietly and chose a seat against the wall, her hands folded on her bag, knuckles pale. Sophie arrived 2 minutes later in a blazer that photographed well and settled beside her shoulder-to-shoulder, voice low. The judge, Grady Square and careful, the kind of man who reads manuals, took the bench at 9:12. The clerk called the case Whitfield v. Hale et al., application for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. Words without music until a human breathes into them. Nathan rose. He does not perform, he assembles. Your Honor. This is about keeping hands off what isn't theirs, he said. Then laid out a timeline you could walk a horse down marriage. The DocuSign packets. The durable power of attorney so broad it could lift a barn. The consent to collateralize, the guarantee. The schedules that treated our brand and receivables as something anybody with a stamp could claim. He slid copies to the clerk and to opposing counsel. Exhibits 1 through 5, he said with photographs taken contemporaneously by Ms. Whitfield. Opposing counsel objected to foundation on the photographs, then accepted them subject to argument because even expensive suits do math. Nathan continued corporate filings for Northco Pines, appointments at Great Lakes Bank, public posts that put Derek and a loan officer in the same rooms on the same days. Exhibits 6 through 10. And we have this, Nathan said, lifting a small recorder Tomas had logged with the date, time and bar address, recorded in a public establishment. He pressed play. Derek's voice filled the room, confident and bored. Brand value is the lever. June signs. Leo runs the paper. And Madison's laugh brushed the edges like a match strike. The bailiff's face didn't move. The judge's mouth thinned. Sophie's hand froze on June's sleeve. Opposing counsel stood. Character evidence inadmissible, hearsay prejudicial. Not for truth, Nathan said even. For intent and course of conduct, Your Honor, tied to the documentary record. He didn't push his luck, he didn't need to. The judge nodded. I'll hear it for that limited purpose. Nathan called Tomas for foundation and nothing more. Name, background, he prompted. Tomas gave the bare minimum former detective licensed investigator methods, limited to public sources and observations, where no one had a reasonable expectation of privacy. He authenticated the screenshots, the calendar cache, the bar recording. He explained how business filings are public by design. Opposing counsel tried to turn him into a gossip. Tomas stared at the man as if he were a slow driver in the fast lane and answered in sentences that ended where they should. No conclusions, only facts. Then Nathan called Avery Hale. Avery had put on a clean shirt and the uncomfortable certainty that someone would measure him by it. He raised his right-hand voice steady. Nathan led him through dates at the length of a football field, the auto shop out on County. The day his brother came with a pitch and a promise the weeks afterward, when bridge loan became just a little longer, the month their father had a stroke. He didn't curse. He didn't perform. He said he took our dad's money and didn't come back. Opposing counsel objected to relevance. Not this plaintiff, he said. Different facts, different time. Pattern as planned, Nathan said. Your Honor. It goes to the question of whether this is accident or architecture. Judge Grady let it in. He watched Avery the way a man watches the weather that decides his hay. Nathan rested. The judge turned to Derek's counsel. The man in the expensive suit adjusted his cuff as if that might make the morning different. We have a husband trying to help a family. Enterprise modernize, he said. POAs are routine. Mrs. Whitfield is sentimental about logos and has misinterpreted ordinary instruments. There is no evidence of movement of assets, no recorded liens, no transfers. The court should not preempt lawful commerce because a mother-in-law dislikes the pace of paperwork. Nathan stood again, but the judge lifted a hand. I'm going to ask Ms. Whitfield to step forward. For a second, my body thought he meant me. He meant June. She stood, walked to the small podium as if it might bite, and gripped both sides like a person riding out a wake. Ms. Whitfield, Judge Grady said, voice leveled to meet hers. I don't need your feelings about marriage. I need to understand what authority you intended to give and what you did not. Did you read the documents you signed? Yes, Your Honor, she said, and then stopped. I read as much as I could. I asked questions. I was told it was streamlining. I believe that. She swallowed. I did not intend to pledge my mother's business or name. Do you understand that a durable power of attorney grants someone authority to act for you? Yes, she said. I understand it more now than I did then. Do you wish Mr. Hale to continue to hold that authority? No, Your Honor. Judge Grady let silence sit because it can do more than words. He looked at Derek. Mr. Hale. Derek leaned toward a microphone the clerk had never seen anybody use and said, Your Honor, this is getting emotional. We have plans on a timeline. My wife agreed. Stop, the judge said not loudly. We are not managing your roadshow. The bailiff shifted one step. Leo whispered something that did not help. Judge Grady returned to the record. The standard for a temporary restraining order is likelihood of success on the merits. Irreparable harm, balance of harms in the public interest. He said mostly for the transcript. The documentary evidence suggests a course of conduct aimed at securing the plaintiff's brand value and receivables as collateral through an instrument the plaintiff did not fully understand, abetted by an agent who stood to benefit. The risk to the plaintiff's business interests appears substantial and not fully compensable by damages. The defense has not pointed me to any countervailing hardship beyond delay. He signed the order. The pen made a soft scratch I could feel in my throat. Temporary restraining order granted, he said. No party acting under or through Ms. Whitfield's prior power of attorney may encumber, assign, pledge, transfer, or otherwise affect the Whitfield Orchard brand marks, contracts, accounts, inventory, equipment, or proceeds. No banking institution with notice of this order may accept filings to that effect. The county register shall refuse any instrument touching 41 County Road 12, absent further order. He set a date for a preliminary injunction hearing and handed the clerk a stack that made a sound like a deck of cards squared. Nathan exhaled through his nose the way men do who are built more for tending than for winning. He sat. I realized my fingers were numb from holding the binder. Opposing counsel tried to pivot. Your Honor, in light of the court's order, we'd ask that you admonish the parties to refrain from public statements. The court is not their publicist, Judge Grady said. If anyone speaks, they will do so at their own peril. He glanced toward our row. Ms. Whitfield, you may consult counsel on revocation of the POA. I will not tell you what to sign. June nodded, eyes bright but steady. Court adjourned. The bailiff called all rise, and the room scraped back its chairs like a barn waking up. In the aisle, Derek reached for June's elbow. She stepped sideways, small as a dancer's move, and his hand caught air. June, he said a word that tried to contain 3 other words. Avery appeared between them, not touching anyone, just standing where a brother belongs when a brother has been missing. He didn't look at Derek, he looked at June. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said, and the yes was disciplined, like a line written on ruled paper. Sophie hovered a smile, composed for lenses, then let it drop. She squeezed June's arm once and faded toward the door the way a singer leaves a stage while the chord still rings. Nathan touched my sleeve. "We'll file the revocation," he said. "You'll need a notary." He said it like groceries milk eggs, a form that returns a person to herself. In the hallway, reporters did not appear because this is not that kind of town, but the people who run it did. The clerk from the co-op, the assistant principal, the man who plows our lane, their faces arranged themselves around politeness, around paying attention. Tomas stood by the stairwell and watched Derek and Leo walk fast toward the exit, as if the doors might close early for lunch. I found June near the window that faces the river. Outside, the current shrugged past a shelf of ice that hadn't decided to melt. She breathed like a swimmer who knows the length of the pool and where the wall gives back. "Do you want me to take you home?" I asked. She shook her head. "I have to go by the registrar," she said, voice even. "Then the bank." She lifted her bag and its strap creaked. "I'm fine." "All right," I said. We stepped into the cold. The air felt sharpened on both edges. Nathan peeled off toward his office with a file under his arm and a list already forming in his head. Tomas tipped his chin and disappeared down the steps to wherever men like him keep the day from slipping. At the curb, a grain truck wandered into gear and groaned through the light. I held the binder against my ribs and watched the steam of our breath rise in twin ribbons, separate and visible proof that we were, at least for this moment, standing in the same weather. At the registrar's office, the notary had a rubber stamp the size of a biscuit. She lined up the revocation under the lamp, squared the corners with 2 fingers, and pressed. The ink sank in with a wet certainty. June signed next neat teacher script, then lifted her wrist to keep from smudging. Nobody in the room said more than was needed. The clerk slid copies across the counter. The pages were warm from the machine. Outside, the river moved under a thin skin of ice that pretended to be land. We walked to separate cars with the same posture you use in windheads, tucked hands tight on what matters. Her bag creaked. My binder thumped once against my ribs. "Text me when you're home," I said. She nodded and turned, and the light off the water made her look older in a way that did not hurt. The orchard took the week the way farms take everything into the work. We pulled down the last bins before the ground sealed. The crew stapled tarps across the south door where the sill had shifted. I changed the filter on the heater in the packing shed and wrote the date on the metal with a paint pen. At dawn, the grass glittered as if someone had thrown a jar of sugar into the dark. June came early and stayed late. She learned the grower's dance with a moisture meter, the shuffle between weather maps, the way you test a gala for ripeness by the sting in its perfume. She listened more than she talked, which the men liked, and when she did speak, what came out was specific. On Saturday, she ran the farm store without me. She tied the apron twice around her waist, greeted everyone by the name on their loyalty card, and sent 2 toddlers home with cider pops she pretended were a mistake in the inventory. At closing, she counted the till with her lip caught between her teeth and set the envelopes by denomination in a perfect row. People came and stood where transactions turned into standing. The jam lady asked after my knees and then said plain as flour I was wrong. The feed store man took off his cap and worried the bill and said nothing, which is sometimes more. 2 boys from cross country lugged a crate like a canoe and left with donuts and a story to tell that had no punchline in it. The air over the farm road held the clean smell of hard freeze leaves behind iron and cedar and old wood. Sophie did not come by. The Harbor Moms group went quiet the way a pond does when the wind loses interest. On Monday, the assistant principal brought a class of 2nd graders for a tour. June walked backward through the rows talking about pollination, about why bees know where to go, about the difference between a bruise and a bad spot, when a girl raised her hand and asked how to tell if an apple is ready. June handed her one and said, "Smell it." The girl did and blinked as if someone had said her given name. Avery showed up on a Wednesday with a toolbox and a coil of air hose. He fixed the squeal on the grader and tuned the forklift carburetor by ear. We paid him in cash and pie and the use of a bay in the machine shed, which looked like forgiveness from a distance and like a transaction when you stood close. He worked with his shoulders down, which is a choice. In the office, I pulled the old label art from the file cabinet, the oval with Whitfield Orchard arched like a bridge, and set it on the light table. June traced a clean version with a pencil and then a pen. She added a line beneath in smaller letters, Marquette, Michigan. When the ink dried, she put the sheet in a plastic sleeve and slid it into the front pocket of the binder that had once held only tabs and fear. That night, we printed a run on the small press until the motor got hot and the labels piled like drift. After supper, we took the headlamps and the long-handled pruners out to the north rows. Breath turned white as lace. The cut ends of branches flashed wet in our lights before the cold taught them to be quiet. We worked without much talk, as if language were a thing that spooked easily. When the batteries dimmed, we sat on the low wall by the well and shared the last thermos of cider between our hands. The dogs nosed our boots and leaned their weight into our shins like anchor stones. Back at the house, I set a kettle on and opened the ledger. The pages smelled faintly of pencil and dust. June wrote a date, her name, and a note in the margin that said only labels first run. We looked at it the way you look at a newborn, checking fingers, counting the minutes since the last breath, then closed the book and let it keep what it had been given. A hard frost ate the color out of the maples overnight. In the morning, the sun came up late and flat, and every wire in the trellis sang. We walked the lane in coats zipped to the throat pockets full of screws and a Sharpie. At the end of the drive, the mailbox wore a fur of ice. The town was the same town. The orchard was the same orchard. We lifted the gate and swung it wide. The first car of the day turned in, tires crunching, and the steam from its tailpipe rose with ours into the bright, brittle air. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.